So you mentioned that you are in the process of becoming a church planner in the LCMS.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about that? Like, what's that process like, and how did that even get started?
Yeah. So I guess we could maybe start with the how that got started. So
Yeah.
I was actually initially thinking about doing so Jordan Cooper through the AALC, right? So for people who might not know, Jordan Cooper is not actually LCMS; he's AALC, but
Yep.
it's a smaller church denomination that we're in altar and table fellowship. Like they can come preach with us, we can go preach to them, we can take sacraments at each other's church. So he's really one of few seminaries that's offering a fully online MDiv. Um, so I was going to go that route and do the MDiv, and I was getting the emissions and everything squared away. And I told my vicar about it. He's like, "Oh, cool. Well, let's talk sometime. Come, let's talk." So I went to his office and just expecting to sorry, my phone's just expecting to talk about it a little bit. And then he asked me, he says, "Well, you could do that, or have you ever heard of the SMP? Have you ever heard of the SMP?"
Yeah, specific ministry pastor, right?
Yeah, specific ministry pastor. So it's a program where basically it's a 4-year program, and they whatever church you're involved with, you would be groomed to be the pastor of that church or a pastor at that church.
Yeah.
So as we were talking about seminary, he's like, "Would you ever consider doing the SMP?" And I was like, "Oh, I mean, yeah, but I thought that was like a really rare thing." Like, I wasn't coming to him being
Hmm.
like, "Hey, how do I get into SMP?" Right? It was more just, "Would you consider going this route?" And I said, "Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, that would put you in a church." So the normal seminary experience, you do about 2.5 years, and you do a vicarage. SMP is you're doing vicarage from day one. You're doing vicarage the whole time, and you're doing the schooling on top of it.
Yeah.
So would you be interested in doing that? I said, I mean, yeah, I mean, if there's an opening, I'd love to do it. So it turns out that, so Pastor Jerry, that's actually the guy who planted our church, because my vicar is an SMP.
Hmm.
So my pastor who planted our church had started another church in Robinson, which is in the Waco area. He's looking to retire. He needs somebody to come take over that church in the next couple of years. So that would be the end goal is get if the district signs off on me, if the Texas district signs off on me and assesses me for church planting, I would take over that church plant once he retires
Gotcha.
in in a couple years. Now he's a crazy guy. He's actually talking about planting another church before he retires. So we'll see if we'll see how what all happens. But yeah, so really just kind of, I mean, I want to say kind of fell in my lap. Um, yeah, so God opened the door there, obviously, um, and yeah,
Is that
so
is that through Concordia in Austin?
no through the seminary, so St. Louis, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Concordia here is it's just a university.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I'm misremembering. I think because one of the associate pastor at my church went through the SMP program and
Oh,
just finished. I
okay,
think last year.
okay, yeah,
So
good to know.
he was our vicar for several years while he was doing that, and he's a second
Yep,
career guy. He's
yep,
been at this church for 19 years, but and they just he's someone who's been raised up through the church
right.
and went through I guess it's St. Louis.
Yeah, St. Louis.
He was doing stuff in Austin, I thought, but maybe that
Maybe
was like
undergraduate
distance
or
learning
something
or
like that,
something.
or could be some other
I
courses.
don't know, but yeah, I think he just finished his studies like last year.
Yeah,
Um, so
it's
he's
really
got
kind of
he's
geared more towards second career kind of guys,
yeah.
and it's really big. I mean, the way I look at it is they created the program because they had to fast track people, and they had to. We got a spot here. How are we going to fill this? It's hard. It's hard to call a pastor. And it's like we can only pay you part time. Well, who's going to want to take a part time pastor call, right? But if
Yeah.
it's you're pastoring part time, working part time, doing school while you're getting trained up to do this, it's a non-traditional route, but it's a route where there's a need. It's a
Would
route where there's,
the so in theory, once like just theoretically, of course, because stuff might change, right? But like
yeah.
that Waco church, would you be expecting to be bivocational of some in some type?
I mean, I think for a while, yeah,
Yeah.
for a while
Okay.
they
Is
yeah. I mean, if they get, I mean, who knows? If they get 15 more families in the next 2 months, and maybe they might have the salary there. But as it stands
yeah.
right now, they would be bivocational. They would pay my schooling, which is awesome,
Oh, that's
But
great.
yeah, I'd be working a normal job and then doing that on the side.
Is so is bivocational training or is it anything of like that part of the SMP, or is the
I
SMP
don't think so.
more? Okay,
No, I think SMP is just seminary.
gotcha.
So it's just
And
more
that's is that 2 years of seminary? So would that be an MDiv?
4 years.
4 years? Okay, so
Yeah.
you've got, and then would that be 4 years until you're ordained then, or
I think you get ordained at like 2.5 years,
okay?
and then you have another additional 1.5 years of schooling. It's not an MDiv though, so if you're someone who's really intent on having the MDiv on your wall, it might not be the way to go.
Yeah.
You can get the MDiv, but it's like an additional 4 years
Oh
or something
wow,
like that too.
like
So it's
four
just
more on top.
you could go do another 2 years, and then you'd be a general pastor. Um, but I mean, I don't want to say that the seminary is not important for me, but the call is really the external call. So if we wanted to get in all that too, so
Yeah, I was going to ask about that because that is, I grew up in the Baptist movement. I moved to a couple different ones over my lifetime, but it was all Baptist.
uh-huh.
I would say Baptist, Pentecostal. I'm not aware of like the specific process in the Reformed, but there is a difference in how you're basically called to ministry. It's
Yeah,
very very focused, and
yeah,
there's other parallels I think with finding the will of God for your life. It's very
yes,
internal. It's very
sure, yep,
subjective. Whereas I was kind of, I don't know, nonplussed about it. I think when I found out about how it happens in the LCMS or how it happens maybe in the larger Lutheran world, which is
yeah,
not an internal call, but an external call,
yeah.
right?
So that's what I was wondering. Like the episode you guys just did on church planting, I don't know if they talked too much about that, and I don't know if
Mm-mm.
they've gone
It's
through
it's not a
training.
category. It's not a category in like the Baptist or non-denominational movements,
Yeah.
as far as I can tell.
Because I know people who have started churches and they're like, we had a small group and it became a church. Like it's
Yeah,
not that. It's no. So there is an internal call. Obviously, they don't want to call guys that don't want to be pastors, But
yeah,
it's different. It's maybe in the non-denom world it could be too like, oh, I'm going to go across the country and start a church in Indiana because I feel like it. Or I don't know.
yeah,
Ours, there's an external call. There has to be a church calling you to do this. There has to be a church that is bringing you in to be the leader of that church. So that's what we mean by external call. So you and me can have the internal call. I have a desire. I want to be a pastor. I want to be in the ministry. But if there's no external call, you're not going to be a pastor. You're going to have
yeah,
that desire, and it's a good desire. But if no church is calling you, then you're not going to be a pastor. So in general, the is that my work phone going off? Anyways, in general, the LCMS is it just seems from the little I know there's a higher standard for their pastors and for all this.
yeah,
So I mean, if you went traditional route, I don't think anyone's going to be a pastor without an MDiv. I mean, there might be exceptions, but you're doing MDiv, you're doing 2.5 years, 1 year vicarage. Um,
yeah,
SMP, you got to get signed off by the seminary. You got to get signed off by the church. I'm having to get signed off by the district. Like it's a bunch of stuff going into it that's involved, and that's all the external call there. The
yeah.
church, the denomination, the district is calling you into that.
Yeah, I heard it. This might not be completely accurate, but I've heard it described as um, I've got a friend who's considering this because his pastor has specifically said to him, "I think you make a good pastor. I think you
Uh-huh.
should think about this. I think you should look into this." And
Uh-huh.
that is, that's a he wouldn't have necessarily pursued that
Yeah.
without that sort of external recognition and
Yeah.
prompting, right?
Right. Right.
So, and I
Yeah.
feel like I feel like that's I want to get back to the seminary piece, but I feel like that is like they talk about Luther's theology and Luther being a very earthy man and
Uh-huh.
talking about vocation, talking everything's very grounded
Yeah.
and realistic.
Yeah.
And there's not, he talks like about the enthusiasts and how they're
Yeah.
looking internally for everything,
Yeah.
whereas we have a very almost external focus in a lot of ways.
Yeah. We're more
We
objective, so that might be
we
a good way to do it. It's like, say you take the enthusiast, right? Hey, why did you start your church? Oh, I felt like I needed to do this. This is something that I had to do. So then they go somewhere, they start a church, they start their own denomination, right? It's not like us. We feel that tug, but then it's like, no, there needs to be an objective call. There needs to be a church, a
yeah.
physical church, part of this. Like, you're not just going to go and start an LCMS church. Like, that stuff just doesn't happen.
They don't. Yeah, they're
You're
not
going
going
to
to be like,
start
"Oh, sure, come on in."
a little neighborhood church and call yourself Lutheran. Sure, you can do that, but you're
Yeah,
not. You're not going to get. You have to get chartered in by a bigger church. You have to get sent out by a bigger church, right? Like, so you're right. It is very. It's all very grounded. It's all
yeah.
very. There's a lot of accountability, right? So I'll be under the pastor. I'll be under my SMP supervisor. I'll be part of a cohort. I'll have my professors that I'm accountable to the district, all this kind of stuff. So it's all very objective and all very tangible. So
Hmm.
you're not just flying by the seat of your pants.
I think you can see that in other areas too. Like the sacraments are an objective external thing.
Yeah.
It's just interesting, and that's not. I'm not trying to like bag on other denominations, but it's
No, yeah, sure.
interesting just the how that theme is kind of present in all sorts of areas of that you maybe wouldn't even notice until you're looking for it. So
Yeah. I call it paint by numbers, bro. It's like, you want to find Christ? Come to church. He'll meet you at the table. It's
yeah,
not this, yeah, you got to go climb a mountain. You got to go. No, you want to find Christ? Go. He meets you in the waters of baptism. He meets you at the table.
yeah.
This is this is the body. This is the blood. It's like, it's making it it makes it and not easy in a bad way, but just like, it's streamlined. It's cutting out all
Christ
some of the,
goes with us all the way.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I need to listen to that hymn again. Uh,
Yeah.
it's good stuff, man. So that's I'll go back to the seminary thing. So that's one of the things where when I was early on, I was kind of considering Lutheranism, but I wasn't ready to make the jump.
Uh-huh.
That was one of the things that I was actually very impressed by with the LCMS specifically, and it might be the same or similar in a lot of other Lutheran
Uh-huh.
denominations, at least the conservative ones. But one of the things that I was really impressed with was the seminary requirements and the
Uh-huh.
language requirements. It was like Latin, Greek, Hebrew,
Yeah.
like multiple years of each. And I think
Yeah.
German in some
It,
programs
it,
as
it
well.
could be. Yeah.
So I was like, wow, I'm like, that is awesome. Like I know that like my pastors are very well educated,
Yeah.
just in the like either the St. Louis or Fort Wayne
Yep.
seminaries. They've got
Yep.
some like apparently. I'm not sure if it's still going on, but there's actually an Orthodox seminary that sends their seminarians to take Greek at
Oh, okay.
one of
Yeah.
our Lutheran seminaries. I don't
Uh,
know if it's St. Louis or if it's Fort Wayne.
yeah.
But yeah, this is a place that's training Orthodox pastors, and they're like, okay, go and take your Greek from the Lutherans, from the
Yeah.
Germans over there.
Yeah. It could
It's
be too,
great.
just that those are smaller seminaries or something like that. And they're, sending it to Concordia because it's more of an established, organization or something like
No, it's
that.
Lutheran superiority.
Yeah. Well, even that too, like, even to get with the seminary, like to get into the seminary for SMP, it's like 3 entrance exams. I had an Old Testament, New Testament, um, systematic theology tests, 100 questions, right? Like I had the, I'll show you one of the books. Like these are the books, like 600, 700 page books, they're testing you on. Like, so
Yeah.
even that stuff, it's very, yeah, very, very serious stuff that you got to go through. I don't know if we're going to learn the languages. I think that would be if I went the additional 2 years for the master's, we would learn the languages. We're doing all the New Testament, all the Old Testament, but I think we do it in English
Mm.
just because the nature of the call. Because until you get that general pastor, you're really only called to your one church. A general pastor can take a call anywhere. SMP is really kind of grassroots. You're being trained, you're being taught specifically to be a pastor at one church. So it has some pros and some cons.
Yeah.
Um,
I
yeah,
know our vicar who has become the associate pastor. I think for the SMP for him it was family ministry essentially of some type.
okay. Yeah,
So like that particular program essentially was one the big part of his call.
gotcha.
Um, so yeah, it's
Yeah.
fascinating.
No, I mean it's all really interesting. It's kind of ideal for like church plants too. So I think, I mean, I don't know, obviously I don't know the future, but I could see myself, going to the SMP, pastoring for a couple years, and then I've done I've done a lot of like street ministry, a lot of recovery. I've been in recovery for 11 years, so I've spent a lot of time in drug rehabs and psych wards, just the pretty places a lot of people don't go to just because they don't have any good reason to go there. But I'm in recovery, and you want to find drug addicts, go to those kind of go to those kind of places. But I could even see myself like having like a downtown mission or something kind of like that, like
Hmm.
a mission church that geared to reaching the homeless and the drug addicts in like downtown Waco or something like that. I don't know if that's something that Lutherans do a lot, but that's definitely something that's been on my mind for quite some time.
You have an internal call for that right now?
Yeah, it's well, that's the thing too. Even if all this falls through, it's like I'm still doing this stuff to an extent. I wouldn't be running a church, but like discipling people, working with people. I do. That's just it's kind of my personality type, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I wouldn't be doing it either way. I just wouldn't. That wouldn't be the external call, and it wouldn't be at a pastor level. It would be more of a mentor or a
Yeah.
sponsor kind of.
Does the SMP require like a bachelor's?
I have one, but I don't know if it does. I've heard that it does, but I've also heard that it might not. I think as long
Gotcha.
as you can pass the entrance exams, I think that's the key.
Hmm.